The French Riviera, or Côte d'Azur if you want to impress people, is a 115-kilometre stretch of southern French coastline that runs from the Italian border to Toulon. Nice, Cannes, Monaco, Antibes, Saint-Tropez. These aren't just towns on the French Riviera, they're brand names. When you mention the Côte d'Azur, people immediately think of beaches, film festivals and glamour. What they don't think of, traffic jams in August, sunburns that require medical intervention, and the very real possibility of paying €9 for a bottle of water. That's the French Riviera for you. Beautiful, expensive, ridiculous, and always worth the trip. This time, we're going all over the French Riviera, from Menton in the east to Toulon in the west. As usual, we're not holding back. Have fun. It's a bit weird, really, to start a video about the French Riviera with a place that isn't in France at all. Monaco is the second smallest country in the world after Vatican City. It's bordered on 3 sides by France and on the 4th by the sea. Monaco is the Côte d'Azur's ultimate expression of luxury, condensed to near parody. Where other French Riviera destinations balance tourism with local life, Monaco has committed entirely to being exclusive and expensive. The Côte d'Azur location provides enormous advantages. Mediterranean climate delivers 300 days of sunshine, and warm summers are perfect for outdoor lifestyle Monaco promotes. The casino, once the financial backbone of Monaco, now contributes less than 5% of government revenue. Tourism and financial services carry the economic weight these days. Even budget Monaco costs more than luxury travel elsewhere on the Côte d'Azur. Coffee costs €8. Modest lunches reach €40 per person. Hotels start expensive and escalate from there. Limited budgets should base in Nice, Menton, or other French Riviera towns and visit Monaco as a day trip. The Genoese established a fortress on the Rock of Monaco in 1215. The Grimaldi family, originally from Genoa, seized control in 1297 when François Grimaldi allegedly dressed as a Franciscan monk and gained entry to the fortress. Whether this story is entirely accurate matters less than the fact that the Grimaldi family has ruled ever since, making theirs one of the oldest ruling dynasties in Europe. The principality became a French protectorate in 1861 when Charles III ceded the towns of Menton and Roquebrune to France. This reduced Monaco's territory by about 95%, which must have been irritating. In exchange, France recognized Monaco's sovereignty and established a customs union. The same Charles III, now ruling over a much smaller territory, decided to open a casino. This proved to be a sound financial decision. From there, Monaco's reputation grew in tandem with the broader Côte d'Azur. The French Riviera became a seasonal destination for European elites, later expanding to a global audience. Travel to the region increased with the expansion of railways in the 19th century, followed by improved roads and air connections in the 20th. Monaco benefited from proximity without needing to offer scale. It specialized instead in wealth and events. Right, let's talk about why Monaco exists in its current form. Monaco has no income tax. None. Zero. You live there, you pay no income tax, no capital gains tax, no wealth tax, no property tax for residents. Now, before you all start packing, there's a catch. To become a resident, you need to prove you can support yourself, and you need to rent or buy property. The average price per square metre for an apartment in Monaco recently exceeded €40,000. You need about €10 million just to afford a decent flat. But here's my favourite part. Cunning French citizens can't use this loophole. There's a treaty from 1963 that says if you're French and you move to Monaco after that date, you still have to pay French income tax. So you can literally see France from your Monaco apartment. You're surrounded by France, you probably buy your groceries in France because it's cheaper, and you're still paying French taxes. Monaco has more police per person than most dictatorships, yet almost no crime, probably because stealing here would require stealing from people who can afford better lawyers than your entire country. 30% of the population are millionaires, which makes the rest of us feel like we're visiting the wrong planet. They have more boats than citizens, and the National Orchestra is bigger than the army. And then there's Formula One. Every May, the Monaco Grand Prix turns the streets into a racetrack. The circuit is 3.3 kilometers of pure terror. Narrow roads, zero runoff, barriers that punish mistakes with six-figure repair bills. Overtaking is basically impossible. Drivers say it's the hardest race mentally because one lapse in concentration and your car becomes modern art against a wall. Meanwhile, super yachts park in the harbour and people sip champagne while watching millionaires in flameproof suits try not to die. The Monaco Grand Prix pays no hosting fee to Formula One, unlike every other race on the calendar. Monaco pays nothing, supposedly because of the race's prestige and history. In practice, this means Monaco profits from hosting, while other circuits pay for the same privilege. Prince Albert II competed in 5 Winter Olympics as part of Monaco's bobsled team. Yes, bobsled team. His results were unremarkable. Monaco has never won a Winter Olympics medal, unsurprising for a Mediterranean microstate without winter sports facilities. Albert slid down the bobsled track 5 times and still finished behind the Jamaican team who were wearing flip-flops. They say his bobsled team was so slow the ice melted before they reached the bottom. The Monaco Yacht Show in September displays super yachts for those buying or selling these floating palaces. Entry requires accreditation, immediately excluding casual tourists and anyone without legitimate business connections. Swimming outside designated areas is prohibited and dangerous. Monaco has boat traffic that won't appreciate swimmers in navigation channels. Beaches have marked zones and lifeguards for good reason. Strong currents and boat traffic make unauthorized swimming a poor decision. Monaco is the world's most densely populated sovereign country at 19,000 people per square kilometre. This density would be intolerable almost anywhere else. But Monaco manages through vertical construction and the fact that many residents own multiple properties worldwide and don't actually spend much time here. The population density creates challenges that Monaco solves by building upward, downward and into the sea. The Principality has 0 agricultural land. Monaco is 100% urbanized. Every square metre is buildings or roads. Complete absence of agriculture means Monaco imports all food from the surrounding Côte d'Azur and beyond. No one's growing tomatoes on their balcony for patriotic food security. Monaco has expanded territory by 20% since 1861 through land reclamation. When you're Monaco and need space, you just build more country. Fontvieille district was built on 22 hectares of reclaimed land in the 1970s. Current projects aim to add 6 more hectares. They are literally making more Monaco. Getting citizenship in Monaco is simple. Live there for years, prove serious wealth, get approval from the prince, yes, the superjock from the Olympics, and then wait long enough to question your original plan. Or you can marry a Monegasque citizen and wait a decade, which is unlikely to happen if you're an average guy from Manchester. Trains connect Monaco to the rest of the French Riviera beautifully. Monaco's station is underground, carved into rock. Trains run every 20 minutes to Nice, hourly to Cannes, and into Italy. Driving to Monaco is possible for those who enjoy the Côte d'Azur's 3 Corniche roads. The low Corniche goes through towns at sea level. The middle Corniche has the best views. The high Corniche makes you trust the guardrails and hope for the best. All 3 eventually deliver you to Monaco, where parking costs more than a weekend elsewhere. Monaco runs 6 bus lines covering the Principality. Tickets are €2, which is reasonable until you realise walking between most destinations takes less time than waiting for the bus. You can walk from one end of Monaco to the other in 40 minutes. Menton is the Côte d'Azur's forgotten stepchild. The town sits at the eastern edge of the Riviera. You could throw a lemon and hit Italy. It's basically where France ends and Italy begins. Most people on the French Riviera zip right through Menton on their way to somewhere better. Monaco gleams just 10 kilometers west. The Italian border lies 2 kilometers east. Menton sits in this geographical purgatory, a liminal space, the French Riviera's afterthought. In 1848, Menton and neighbouring Roquebrune declared themselves a free city. Revolution was trending on the French Riviera that year. They wanted out from Monaco's tax policies. Fair enough. The towns placed themselves under Sardinian protection. In 1860, France and Sardinia made a deal. Menton got absorbed into France via plebiscite. Monaco got 4 million francs as compensation. The 19th century brought tourism to the French Riviera. Wealthy Europeans discovered they could winter in warm places, in instead of freezing in drafty estates. Menton marketed itself as a health resort. Tuberculosis patients came here because the doctors recommended the air. Whether this actually helped, we don't really know. World War II interrupted the party. Italian forces occupied Menton in 1940, and Allied bombing damaged the old town. Liberation came in 1944. Reconstruction took years, but the French Riviera bounced back eventually. Tourism resumed, and the cycle continued. The old town climbs the hillside in a tangle of narrow streets and staircases, medieval city planning at its finest, which is to say, no planning at all, just organic chaos accumulating over centuries. The closeness of Italy is easy to notice. Buildings lean into each other, laundry hangs where you'd expect windows, the streets twist at random angles. Navigation requires either a map or resignation to being lost. The colour palette runs to yellow and terracotta, very French Riviera. The Basilica of St. Michael towers over the old town. Baroque architecture built in the 17th century. Inside you'll find frescoes, marble and the usual Catholic gilding. The bell tower punctures the skyline. It makes a decent landmark if you're lost in the old town's maze. Menton has the warmest microclimate on the French Riviera. The mountains shelter the town from northern winds. Temperatures rarely drop below freezing. Winter feels like autumn in most places, and summer bakes everything at Mediterranean intensity. This climate creates conditions for citrus cultivation, lemons especially. Oh boy, the lemons. Menton produces lemons the way other French Riviera towns produce overpriced yacht accessories. The Menton lemon earned an IGP designation. These lemons grow larger and sweeter than regular lemons, slightly better than regular, but nothing to write home about. Every February, Menton hosts the Lemon Festival. This event defines the town's identity more than anything else. Forget the Riviera's usual yacht parties and film festivals. Menton builds giant sculptures out of lemons and oranges, then parades them through town on Sundays and Thursdays during the festival. After the festival, all that fruit gets recycled. It doesn't go to waste. The lemons and oranges get processed into juice and other products, or composted. You can't just throw 140 tons of citrus into regular trash. The lemon thing goes too far, obviously. One fruit shouldn't dominate civic identity so completely. Driving in Menton requires patience and parking fees. The streets in the old town barely fit pedestrians, let alone cars. Modern sections allow traffic, but parking spaces fill quickly. Public parking lots charge by the hour. There is some free parking in outer areas, but it requires some walking. The Cote d'Azur's parking situation remains universally frustrating across all towns. The town's border position creates an interesting cultural blend. French administration, Italian influence, lemons tying everything together. The pace feels slower than elsewhere on the Côte d'Azur, less hurried, less focused on luxury brand consumption, more interested in citrus agriculture and Baroque churches. For budget-conscious visitors, Menton offers better value than Western alternatives. Accommodation here costs less than in Monaco or Nice. The region's price gradient decreases as you move east. Menton benefits from this positioning. Hotels range from budget to luxury. Nothing reaches Monaco's ridiculous heights. The luxury here feels almost reasonable by French Riviera standards. Almost. Before we continue this journey, please hit the like button and subscribe to World Travel Guide. Ez is one of the most famous hilltop villages on the French Riviera. It's heavily promoted and widely visited, basically a must-see stop between Nice and Monaco. Getting to Ez requires a decision. Suffer by car, suffer by bus, or suffer by foot. All options involve suffering, just different kinds. If you're driving, you take the Moyenne Road, one of the 3 cliff-hugging roads that run along this stretch of the French Riviera. It's scenic, which is French for terrifying. The road was built in the 1920s and has the turning radius of a corkscrew. There's a parking lot at the base of the village. It costs about €10 for the day, and in summer it's full by 10 in the morning. If you find a spot on the street, you've won the lottery. You can also take the bus. The number 82 or 112 from Nice will get you here in about 30 minutes. And then there's the Nietzsche path, which connects Ez-sur-Mer at sea level to Ez village at the top. It's a steep, rocky trail that climbs 400 meters over about 1.5 kilometers. Nietzsche used to walk this path in the 1880s when he was staying on the Côte Azur. The path is still there. People still hike it. There's no shade, no water fountains, and no cell service for parts of it. You're alone with your thoughts and your burning calves, just like Nietzsche intended. The village itself is small. You can walk from the entrance to the top in 15 minutes if the streets are empty, which they never are. The layout is classic medieval, a warren of narrow alleys and stone staircases that twist upward like a very old, very charming labyrinth. Every corner looks like a postcard. Every doorway is framed by flowers. Ivy crawls up ancient walls. Ez is no longer a real medieval settlement. It's a tourist attraction disguised as a village. The ground floors of almost every building have been converted into galleries and shops selling lavender sachets. You'll find no bakery, no butcher, no pharmacy. If the 2,000 residents actually live here, they're very good at hiding. The real attraction, though, is at the very top. The Jardin Exotique des, the exotic garden. It sits on the ruins of a medieval castle that was destroyed in 1706 on the orders of Louis XIV. The ruins were left to crumble until the 1940s, when the mayor decided to turn the site into a garden. The garden opened in 1949, and it's remarkable. It's filled with hundreds of species of cacti and drought-resistant plants from around the world. They thrive here because the French Riviera gets 300 days of sun a year and almost no rain in summer. Some of the cacti are taller than you. Some have spines the length of your finger. All of them look mildly threatening. But the real reason you're here is the view. From the top of the garden, you're standing at the highest point of the village, 427 meters above the sea, with nothing between you and the horizon. The view stretches from Italy in the east to the Estoril Mountains in the west. Entry to the garden costs €8. It's open daily from about 9 in the morning to sunset, depending on the season. Villefranche-sur-Mer is one of the prettiest small towns on the French Riviera, just east of Nice. It sits on one of the deepest natural harbours in the Mediterranean. We're talking 95 metres deep, right up against the shoreline. That's deep enough to park an aircraft carrier, which is exactly what the US Navy did for decades. The Sixth Fleet used this as a home port from 1946 until 1966, back when the French and Americans were still on speaking terms. Then de Gaulle kicked NATO out of France, and the fleet moved to Naples. The Americans left behind some interesting infrastructure, a few good stories, and probably some unpaid bar tabs along the Côte d'Azur. The town's name translates to Free Town on the Sea, and it's called that because in 1295, Charles II of Anjou declared it a free port to attract settlers. No taxes, no customs duties, just show up and enjoy the Mediterranean. Of course, people came. Fishermen, sailors, merchants, and the kind of opportunists who thrive in tax-free zones. It worked, and the town grew. The harbour became one of the most important on the French Riviera, and Villefranche became a strategic naval base that everyone wanted to control. The town has long been a filming magnet thanks to its perfect Côte d'Azur look. One of its most famous appearances is in To Catch a Thief, directed by Alfred Hitchcock. The town's cinematic appeal comes from how little it has changed. Filmmakers don't need to build sets, they just turn the camera around. From Villefranche, you're perfectly positioned to explore the rest of the French Riviera. Nice is 7 minutes away by train. Monaco is 15 minutes. You can do both as day trips and still be back in time for dinner. Saint-Jean-Cap-Ferrat is next door, literally a 20-minute walk along the coast. There's a train station on the Nice-Ventimiglia line. Trains run frequently, every 15 to 30 minutes, depending on the time of day. A one-way ticket from Nice costs €2, which is cheaper than a coffee. The station is small and unstaffed, so buy your ticket in advance or use the machines. The station sits right on the water, which means you step off the train and directly into one of the best views on the Riviera. There's also a small bus that runs between the station and the port, but it's infrequent and often crowded. This is one of the easiest towns on the coast to reach without a car, which is good because parking here is a nightmare designed by someone who hates you personally. The Nice Côte d'Azur airport is just 20 minutes away by taxi. The train station is below the old town, so you're climbing either way. The town is essentially vertical. Dining in Villefranche can go two ways. You can eat at the waterfront restaurants, where the view is excellent and the prices are astronomical. Or you can walk 50 metres inland and find family-run spots where the food is better and cheaper. The waterfront has some nice restaurants, most of them offering grilled fish and a view that costs more than the food. But you probably won't even mind, because you're sitting 3 metres from the Mediterranean. You'd walk right past the Église Saint-Michel if you weren't paying attention. This cheerful pink and yellow Baroque church sits in the heart of the old town, squeezed between buildings like someone forgot to leave room for a proper church plaza. It is mostly 18th century Baroque, the result of renovations that turned a simple medieval chapel into something considerably more theatrical. The church also somehow survived being turned into a warehouse during the French Revolution. The locals clearly fought hard to keep it. This is one of the best swimming spots on the French Riviera, and the clarity of the water rivals anything you'll find further east toward Italy. You can see 10 metres down without even trying. The bay is calm, protected by the curve of the harbour, and the swimming is excellent. In summer, the beach gets crowded, but nothing like Nice or Cannes. You can still find space if you arrive before 10 in the morning. You'll also see cruise ships. Villefranche is a popular stop because the water is deep enough for massive vessels to anchor close to shore. The big ships drop anchor in the middle of the bay, and passengers are ferried to land on small tenders. That means on certain days, the town gets 3,000 tourists who have 4 hours to see everything, buy something, and get back on the boat. You should check the cruise schedule if you want to avoid that. The official port website lists arrivals. If you see 3 ships scheduled for the same day, maybe visit somewhere else, or come later in the afternoon when they've all left and the town exhales. Villefranche doesn't have a ton of nightlife, but there are a few bars, some live music in summer, and a general sense that people here prefer their evenings slow. If you want clubs and the usual Côte d'Azur chaos, you're just a stone's throw from Nice. Villefranche is for the after party, not the party itself. Nice is the biggest city on the French Riviera. Economically, it's the engine of the region. With 5 million visitors annually, the city's economic survival is linked to the travel industry, creating a dependency that influences everything from urban planning to zoning laws. The Nice Côte d'Azur Airport, 7 kilometers from the city centre, handles the aerial influx, with Terminal 1 for international flights and Terminal 2 for budget carriers. It's the third busiest in France after the Paris airports. The express bus lines 98 and 99 connect to the city for €10, running every 20 to 30 minutes. The tram extension to the airport opened recently. Line 2 should be your choice. It takes about 30 minutes to reach the city centre. Progress happens even on the French Riviera. Nice's population of 350,000 people represents a demographic layer cake that would fascinate sociologists if they could afford the French Riviera rents long enough to study it. The city is the 5th largest in France, though calling it French oversimplifies a population where you're as likely to hear Russian, Arabic or Italian as you are French, and where the local Niçart dialect survives primarily in the mouths of about 15 octogenarians who guard it like a state secret. Nice has one of France's highest percentages of residents over 60, creating a city where pharmacies outnumber nightclubs and dinner reservations at 6 p.m. aren't just acceptable but standard. The Promenade des Anglais stretches along Nice's waterfront, 7 kilometers of palm trees and blue chairs. This waterfront boulevard remains Nice's most iconic feature, though calling it an attraction feels reductive. It's more like the city's spine, or perhaps its front porch. The promenade serves as exercise track for morning joggers and catwalk for evening strutters. The name translates to Walkway of the English, because British residents funded its construction in the 1820s. The eastern end, near the old town, gets most crowded. The Castle Hill rises at this end. The western sections toward the airport see fewer pedestrians. During summer, the promenade achieves density levels that would concern fire marshals, with rollerbladers and electric scooter riders treating the dedicated bike lane like a Formula One track, while pedestrians spill over from overcrowded sidewalks. The evening passeggiata sees locals joining tourists in the ritual promenade, though you can distinguish them by their ability to walk without photographing involving literally everything. Castle Hill, or Colline du Château, presents one of Nice's great naming ironies. Guess what? There's no castle. What's there instead is a 92-metre high park that offers great views. You can reach the summit via stairs if you're masochistic, elevator if you're pragmatic, or tourist train if you've abandoned all pretense of athletic capability. The waterfall, artificial though it may be, provides an oddly soothing soundtrack to your Côte d'Azur contemplation. Place Masséna, the city's main square, underwent a major renovation in recent years that transformed it from a traffic roundabout into a genuinely impressive public space. The 7 resin statues atop tall poles represent the 7 continents. The square serves as Nice's collective living room. It hosts everything from carnival celebrations to Christmas markets. The nearby fountain, with its Apollo statue, provides endless entertainment as travel-weary visitors ignore the "Do not enter" signs to cool their feet, much to the resignation of local police, who've apparently given up enforcing this particular rule. Notre-Dame de Nice, that neo-Gothic behemoth on Avenue Jean Médecin, was built between 1864 and 1868, immediately after Nice became French, timing that's about as subtle as the twin 65-metre towers. Its location on Nice's main shopping street creates a bizarre contrast. Gothic spires rising above Zara and H&M that perfectly encapsulates Côte d'Azur's relationship with the sacred, respectful but not so much that it interferes with commerce. The tram stops directly outside, disgorging confused shoppers who wanted the Galerie Lafayette, but found religion instead. The water mirror in the Promenade du Paillon is a watery wonderland that has fundamentally altered the social dynamics of downtown Nice since its inauguration in 2013. 128 water jets shoot streams up to various heights in patterns that supposedly follow some algorithmic logic. The surface, when calm, creates reflections of the surrounding architecture and sky. The water mirror has become integral to Nice's identity with surprising speed, proof that not all attractions need historical pedigree to achieve importance. It's a place where the Mediterranean heat becomes bearable, where children's joy drowns out traffic noise, where the French Riviera's sometimes suffocating sophistication gives way to simple pleasure. The coastline here divides into public and private beaches. The public beaches are free and very crowded. During July and August, arriving after 9 in the morning means your beach real estate options involve either the water's edge or the upper reaches, where you're essentially sunbathing in the parking lot. Chair and umbrella rental costs enough to make you consider that perhaps lying on rocks isn't so uncomfortable after all. The most famous private beaches require reservations during peak season and enforce dress codes that suggest swimwear alone isn't sufficiently elegant for the Côte d'Azur. Picnicking from market purchases offers both authenticity and economy, and the coastal paths provide entertainment that costs nothing but shoe leather. The museums have certain free days, usually the first Sunday of the month. Prices in Nice follow a predictable pattern: astronomical in summer, merely expensive in shoulder seasons, and reasonable in winter. A coffee at a cafe on the promenade will cost you €5, while the same coffee 2 blocks inland costs half that. Hotels range from the genuinely luxurious to perfectly acceptable budget options in the Libération district, where you sacrifice sea views for the ability to afford food. Airbnb has complicated the accommodation landscape, driving up long-term rental prices for locals, while offering travel opportunities for visitors who prefer apartments to hotels. A decent hotel room in peak season starts around €150 per night, though decent is subjective and often means has some kind of air conditioning and isn't above a nightclub. How long should you stay? The minimum viable Nice experience requires 3 days, one for the old town and markets, one for museums and cultural sites, and one for simply chilling on the French Riviera without an agenda. Vence sits in the hills above the French Riviera, 10 kilometres inland from the coast and 22 kilometres from Nice. At an elevation of 325 metres, it's high enough to get cooler air in summer and actual views, but not so high that you need to worry about altitude sickness or mountain goats. The population is around 20,000, which makes it a real town. This is the French Riviera for people who think the coast has become unbearable. Too many visitors, too much traffic, too much much performance, Vence offers an alternative: stone streets, morning markets, art history, and the sense that you're experiencing something authentic, even though authenticity on the French Riviera is now a carefully curated product sold to visitors who want to feel like they've discovered something the other tourists haven't. Spoiler, you haven't. There are tour buses here too. The history of Vence goes back further than most French Riviera towns, mainly because being inland meant slightly better protection from the constant parade of invaders arriving by sea. The first bishop was Saint Véran, who, according to legend, killed a dragon that was terrorizing the area, or possibly a large aggressive lizard. The historical record is unclear, but locals built a cathedral, so something happened. The medieval period brought walls, thick stone ramparts built in the 13th century to protect against raids, invasions, and general Mediterranean unpleasantness. Much of those walls still stand, encircling the old town in an irregular oval. Then came the artists. In the early 20th century, painters discovered that the light on the French Riviera was exceptional. Vence attracted Raoul Dufy, Marc Chagall, and most famously, Henri Matisse. Matisse moved to Vence in 1943 during World War II, seeking refuge from the chaos on the coast. The climate in Vence is slightly different from the coastal French Riviera, mainly because the elevation provides cooler temperatures, especially at night. When it rains here, it really rains. Sudden, violent downpours that flood the streets, then stop as quickly as they started. The town was built to handle this. The streets are sloped and cobbled with drainage channels, but visitors are often caught off guard. Saint-Paul-de-Vence sits on a narrow hilltop ridge 4 kilometers south of Vence. With a population of 3,500, it's smaller than its neighbour, but infinitely more famous. This is one of the most photographed medieval villages on the French Riviera, which means it's also one of the most visited, which means it's also one of the most crowded. On summer days, the ratio of travellers to actual residents approaches levels normally seen at theme parks. The old village is completely pedestrianised. No cars are allowed inside the ramparts. There are several parking lots on the edge of the village. For centuries, Saint-Paul-de-Vence was just another fortified village in the hills above the Côte Azur. People farmed, made wine, raised livestock, and once in a while got caught up in wars between France and Savoy. The village declined after the Revolution, lost population through the 19th century, and by 1900 was half abandoned. Then came the painters, and everything changed. Picasso moved around the coast, and many of them passed through Saint-Paul-de-Vence, which in those days was a quiet, crumbling village with an inn called La Colombe d'Or. The inn was run by Paul Roux, who opened it in 1920. Artists stayed there, and because many of them were broke, Roux accepted paintings as payment for room and board. Picasso, Matisse, Braque, Léger, Chagall, Miro, all of them stayed at La Colombe d'Or, and all of them left artwork behind. Today, it is one of the most famous hotels and restaurants on the French Riviera, and the art collection is still there. Antibes is one of the oldest towns on the Côte d'Azur. The town's name comes from the ancient Greek Antipolis, meaning the city opposite. Opposite to what? Nice probably, or rather Nicaea, as the Greeks called it. For a while, Antibes was a frontier town, not glamorous, defensive. It sat right on the border between France and the Duchy of Savoy, which meant walls, watchtowers, and a general suspicion of anyone approaching by land or sea. The ramparts you see today were built to keep people out. Fort Carré is the star-shaped fortress that dominates the northern edge of Antibes. Built in the 1550s under orders from King Henry II, it was designed to protect the French Riviera from naval attacks and invasions from Savoy. The star shape wasn't just aesthetic, it's a military design that allows defenders to cover every angle with cannon fire. Then, like much of the Riviera, Antibes had a second life. The 19th and early 20th centuries brought artists and writers chasing light and mild winters. American expats like Francis Scott Fitzgerald and Sarah Murphy started spending summers on the Côte d'Azur, which was revolutionary because until then, everyone left in June. They threw parties in Cap d'Antibes, swam in the sea, and made it fashionable to tan. Fitzgerald even set parts of Tender is the Night here. The French Riviera became a year-round destination, and Antibes became a permanent backdrop for art and wealth. The Musée Picasso sits inside the Château Grimaldi, built on the ramparts overlooking the sea. The building is from the 14th century and was home to the Grimaldi family, the same dynasty that still rules Monaco. In 1946, the town offered Picasso the chateau as a studio. He accepted, and for 6 months he worked like a man possessed. He created paintings, drawings, ceramics and sculptures. The sea, mythology and joy saturated his work here. When he left, he donated everything he'd made. The chateau became the first museum dedicated to Picasso, opened in 1966. Today, it holds 250 of his works, plus pieces by other modern artists. The views from the museum terrace are absurd. Entry is around €8. It's closed on Mondays because France has rules. Even Picasso couldn't change that. Vieille Antibes, the old town, is a maze of narrow streets. You can enter it through one of several stone gates. There are no boulevards, just tight streets that open suddenly into small squares filled with café tables and fountains. At the heart of the old town is the Marché Provençal, a covered market that runs daily, except Mondays. Locals actually shop here, which is always a good sign. You'll find stalls piled high with tomatoes, peaches, melons and herbs. There's also fresh fish from the Mediterranean and olives in a dozen varieties. Come early if you want to avoid the crowds. Come late if you want discounts and chaos. South of the old town lies Cap d'Antibes, a 4-kilometre-long peninsula covered in pine forests and private estates. It has some of the most exclusive real estate on the Côte d'Azur. This is where the real money hides. The Cap has been a retreat for aristocrats and celebrities since the Belle Époque. Beaches in Antibes come in 2 flavours, private and public. The beaches along the old town are small and sheltered. Good for a quick swim, not for sprawling out all day. If you want sand, head to Juan-le-Pin, technically part of Antibes but with a totally different vibe. Juan-le-Pin is louder and more resort focused. It's where the French Riviera lets its hair down. The sand is imported and in summer it's packed. There are beach clubs where you can rent a lounger and sense of superiority for around €40 a day. Or just bring a towel and claim a spot on the public sand. No one will judge you. Okay, they might. But who cares? Juan-le-Pin also hosts a jazz festival every July, one of the oldest and most respected festivals of its kind in Europe. Since 1960, it's brought legends to the French Riviera: Miles Davis, Ray Charles and Herbie Hancock. The concerts happen in a pine grove near the beach, under the stars, with the sea murmuring in the background. Then there's Port Vauban. This is the largest marina in Europe. It holds over 1,500 vessels, including some of the largest private yachts on Earth. We're talking 60-metre floating mansions with helipads and jet skis. There's something oddly satisfying about strolling past a yacht named Lady Lavender IV while eating a €2 crepe. Getting to Antibes is easy. The train is usually the best bet, frequent, cheap and direct. Antibes has a main train station right in the town centre, connected to the rest of the Côte d'Azur and beyond. You can reach Nice in 20 minutes, Cannes in 10 and Monaco in 40. Cannes is often introduced as a crown jewel of the Côte d'Azur. The reputation does much of the preliminary work. The Cannes Film Festival ensures global recognition, even among those who have no intention of attending. The history of Cannes stretches back further than most visitors realise, certainly beyond the red carpets. The Ligurian tribes established first villages here. The name possibly derives from canna, the reeds that grew in the marshland around Le Suquet. Medieval Cannes belonged to the monks of Lerins Abbey, who controlled the islands and mainland holdings. The town remained relatively obscure until 1834, when Lord Brougham, a British Lord Chancellor, stopped here by accident. Cholera had closed the Italian border, blocking his intended travel route to Nice. So he stayed in Cannes instead, built a villa and returned every winter for the next 34 years. British and Russian aristocrats followed, then anyone with enough money to escape northern winters. The Belle Époque changed the French Riviera waterfront with grand hotels and villas that still define the architectural character. Today, with its 75,000 inhabitants, Cannes is a mid-sized French city. There is also a notable seasonal workforce, which arrives as demand increases. The city ranks among the most expensive in France for housing costs, driven by the luxury property market that serves wealthy French and international buyers seeking second homes or investment properties on the French Riviera. This creates creates pressure on the local working population, many of whom commute from less expensive surrounding areas. Cannes is highly organised around its image. This results in efficiency, cleanliness and a predictable experience. It also produces a degree of uniformity, especially along the waterfront. For some travellers, this is reassuring. For others, it may feel overly structured. The Cannes Film Festival is held every May for 12 days of concentrated film industry madness. It's the most influential film festival in the world. The first proper edition took place in September 1946, in the immediate aftermath of the war, as a gesture of cultural revival. It was a fairly joyous and somewhat chaotic affair, with multiple films sharing prizes. The festival found its modern form gradually through the 1950s, establishing the Palme d'Or, the Golden Palm, as its highest award, which remains to this day the most prestigious prize in international cinema. What you can do during the festival without credentials is a lot of standing and paying inflated prices for the privilege of proximity to fame. The red carpet arrivals at the Palais happen twice daily during the festival. The barriers go up early, the good viewing spots fill by afternoon, and what you witness is a parade of people in expensive clothing walking 20 meters while cameras flash. The beach screenings give you free access to classic films and festival selections, projected on a massive screen set up on the beach. The urban layout is not complicated. Cannes is essentially linear. Coastline first, then the town, then the hills. Getting around is pretty easy. The city is small enough to walk. La Croisette is the famous boulevard that runs along the seafront of Cannes. It stretches from the Palais des Festivals at its western end to the Palm Beach Casino at its eastern end, a distance of 1.5 kilometers. This is the grown promenade of the French Riviera, lined with palm trees and luxury hotels. The views over the bay are excellent, and the experience of simply being on this famous stretch of road in the sunshine is a tourist activity in itself. The crowds during July and August can make the walk somewhat unpleasant, but in the shoulder seasons, it's a true pleasure. Le Souquet is the historic old town of Cannes. It sits on a hill just behind the harbour, which means two things. First, it was defensible, and second, it requires walking uphill. The incline is not dramatic, but it is enough to discourage those who prefer flat terrain and immediate rewards. The main route, Rue Saint-Antoine, is narrow and lined with restaurants that range from decent to overpriced, often in the same building. The harbour sits directly below the old town. It is not particularly large by global standards, but it is dense. Berths are tightly arranged, and during major events, capacity becomes an issue. Larger yachts anchor offshore, with smaller boats ferrying passengers back and forth. This is less romantic than it sounds. It is essentially a logistical workaround. Cannes has the longest stretch of beach on the Côte d'Azur that is considered genuinely sandy rather than pebbled. That's a relatively rare feature on the French Riviera coast. The beaches toward the western side of the city, near Le Boca, tend to be less crowded and somewhat less expensive. Water quality has improved since the 1970s, when Mediterranean pollution reached crisis levels, but runoff from urban development still affects local waters. Beach erosion requires constant management and sand replenishment as coastal development interrupts natural sediment patterns. The concentration of diesel-powered yachts contributes to air quality issues during summer. Taking the boat from the harbour to the Lérins Islands is one of the finest things you can do during a travel visit to Cannes. It remains surprisingly underutilised by travellers who prefer to stay on the mainland. The boat crossing takes about 15 minutes and the round-trip cost is modest, typically around 13 to 18 euros per adult. Ile Sainte-Marguerite is most famous for the Fort Royal, the 17th century fortress that was a prison for the mysterious prisoner known as the Man in the Iron Mask, a real historical prisoner whose identity has never been revealed. Alexandre Dumas popularized the story in fiction, but the actual historical prisoner, who wore an iron mask and spent years in this fortress, remains one of France's genuine historical mysteries. Grasse doesn't need an introduction if you've ever smelled expensive perfume, but if you haven't, here it is. This is the perfume capital of the world, a medieval town built on a hillside 20 kilometres inland from Caen, and the glamour of the Cote Azur. It's where 2/3 of France's natural aromas are produced, and where your nose will either have the best day of its life or file for immediate retirement. 50,000 people live here. Millions of flowers die here every year for your luxury, and somehow it all started because medieval leatherworkers couldn't handle their own stench. Everything started during the Renaissance with the booming leather industry. Grasse became famous for gloves, fancy, soft, beautifully tanned gloves that the rich loved to wear. There was just one problem. The tanning process smelled like death. Workers walked around reeking and customers complained. So someone, probably while holding their nose, had the genius idea to perfume the leather. They started infusing gloves with floral scents. Suddenly, Grasse wasn't just making gloves, it was making scented gloves. Catherine de' Medici, the Queen of France, loved them. Fashion followed royalty, as it always does. And by the 17th century, the glove business had faded, but the perfume industry stayed. Grasse went all in. Fields of jasmine, roses and lavender replaced fortifications. Perfumers became alchemists, and the town that once smelled like a tannery became the fragrance factory of Europe. If you've read the novel Perfume: The Story of a Murderer, or seen the 2006 film, then Grasse will feel familiar. The story is set partly here, during the 18th century, and follows a man with an extraordinary sense of smell, who becomes obsessed with capturing the perfect scent by any means necessary. It's dark and disturbing, and it's set in this charming hillside town full of flowers. The film was partially shot in Grasse, and you can still recognise some of the locations. Today, Grasse is home to some of the most famous perfume houses in the world: Fragonard, Molinard and Gallimard. These aren't small startups. They are multi-century operations with laboratories and gardens. If you came to Grasse and didn't visit a perfume house, that's like going to Rome and skipping the Colosseum. The Musée International de la Parfumerie is the serious side of Grasse. Opened in 1989 and renovated in 2008, it's one of the few museums in the world dedicated entirely to the history and art of perfume. Getting to Grasse is easier than pronouncing half the perfume names sold here. If you're already in Caen, it's a 30-minute drive or a short bus ride inland. The town sprawls across terraced slopes. From certain viewpoints, you can see the sea. From others, you see laundry and medieval stonework. Both are equally typical of the French Riviera. The heart of Grasse is the old town. Cour Honoré Crespe is the main square, and the only place in the historic centre where you can breathe without turning sideways. You won't find giant chain hotels here. You will find stone walls and breakfast served with homemade jam. There are a few solid restaurants in the old town. You're inland, so seafood isn't the priority here. Instead, it's vegetables, herbs, olive oil, and slow-cooked dishes that taste like the countryside. Saint-Tropez is the most famous tiny fishing town in France that somehow became synonymous with wealth. With a permanent population of 4,000 people, this place punches way above its weight class. The town was named after a Roman officer called Torpus. He was a Christian martyr who died in Pisa, and his body was put in a boat, then set adrift. The boat washed up here. Well, this is not really the founding story most tourist boards lead with, but the locals built a chapel, named the place after him, and that was that. Saint-Tropez, founded on a floating body and weird maritime ethics. For centuries it was just a quiet fishing village. Then came Brigitte Bardot. In 1956 she starred in the film And God Created Woman, directed by her then husband Roger Vadim. The film was shot in Saint-Tropez, and suddenly the world wanted to know where this blonde French woman was walking around semi-naked. The answer? Right here. Bardot bought a villa and essentially never left. She became the face of Saint-Tropez, and the town became the face of hedonism. Getting to Saint-Tropez is harder than it should be for a place this famous. There is no train station, one of the most iconic destinations on the French Riviera, and the trains just don't go there. The closest station is in Saint-Raphael, 35 kilometers away. From there, you take a bus. The bus takes over an hour because the road is narrow and dangerous. You can also take a boat from Saint-Raphael or Sainte-Maxime, which is infinitely more pleasant and lets you arrive like a human being. You arrive in the old port and it hits you immediately. This is not a place for regular humans. The yachts are so large they have their own zip codes. Some have smaller yachts attached to them, like a luxury Russian doll situation. You'll see people in white clothes who've never experienced stress. You'll see dogs wearing designer collars, and you'll see a man in his 70s with a woman in her 20s, and you'll think, ah yes, this must be love. The town itself is small, almost shockingly small. You can walk from one end to the other in 15 minutes. The streets are narrow and very photogenic. Every corner looks like an album cover. Flowers spill from balconies. Shutters are painted in shades of pink and pale blue. At the centre of it all is the Place des Lys, a large square shaded by plane trees. Twice a week there's a market. La Citadelle sits on a hill overlooking the town and the sea. It's a 17th century fortress built to protect Saint-Tropez from pirates and invaders. Spoiler alert, it didn't work. The town was sacked multiple times. But the citadel survived, and now it's a maritime museum. The views from the top are worth the walk. The beaches are why people really come here, or more accurately, the beach clubs. Because in Saint-Tropez, you don't just go to the beach. You go to Nicky Beach, Club 55 or Bagatelle, where a sunbed costs €50, and you're surrounded by people whose job titles you'll never fully understand. Lifestyle consultant, brand ambassador, wellness entrepreneur, human potential maximization expert. These are the people who summer here. And yes, summer is a verb now. If you want a more low-key experience, head to Plage des Salins or Plage de Tahiti. They're less commercial and you won't need to take out a second mortgage to sit down. You might even see a family with children who pack their own sandwiches. The nightlife in Saint-Tropez is exactly what you'd expect. Loud, expensive and full of people who believe 2 a.m. is when the evening truly begins. Le Cave du Roy inside the Hotel Byblos is the most famous club. It's been around since 1967 and has hosted everyone from Mick Jagger to, well, people who want to be photographed near Mick Jagger. Entry is either invitation only or requires buying a bottle of a drink that costs what a used car costs. Your choice. Sainte-Maxime sits directly across the Gulf of Saint-Tropez, close enough to see the famous town and far enough to save some money. With a population of 15,000, Sainte-Maxime is bigger than its glamorous neighbour, but infinitely less famous, which is exactly the point. This is the French Riviera for people who want sun, sea and reasonable prices. The town's history is refreshingly uneventful. No floating bodies, no celebrity scandals, no dramatic sieges. Sainte-Maxime was named after Sainte-Maxime, a 5th century monk who lived here in relative peace. He wasn't martyred, he just, was there. And honestly, that's a nice change of pace. For centuries, this was a quiet fishing village on the French Riviera. People caught fish, sold fish, and ate fish. Then came the 20th century. The Côte d'Azur became fashionable, and Sainte-Maxime became the place where people stayed when Saint-Tropez was fully booked or prohibitively expensive, which, let's be honest, is always. The town developed a reputation as the family-friendly alternative. There's a rhythm to life here that doesn't revolve entirely around tourist season, even though tourism accounts for more than 70% of the local economy. The first thing you notice is the beach, a long, sandy, public beach. It's almost wholesome, which is disorienting if you've just come from Saint-Tropez. The promenade Simon Laurière runs along the waterfront for nearly 2 kilometres. The town has 10 kilometres of coastline, most of it sandy. The main beach, Plage du Centre, stretches for 800 metres along the town's waterfront. The sand is fine and golden, the water is clear, and the beach is cleaned daily during summer. There are public showers, toilets, and lifeguards on duty from June through September. You can rent a sunbed and umbrella for €20 per day if you want, but most people just bring their own gear and settle in for free. Further east, you'll find Plage de la Nartelle and Plage des Éléphants. La Nartelle is more residential, quieter, with shallow water that's great for kids. Plage des Éléphants is named after a rock formation that, with the right angle and a lot of imagination, looks like an elephant. The locals are very proud of this. If you want to get away from the sand, you can hike up to the Semaphore de Saint-Tropez, an old naval signal station on the hillside. The trail starts just outside town and takes about 45 minutes. Another good hike is up to the Chapelle Sainte-Maxime, a small pilgrimage chapel on a hill north of the old town. The trail is shorter, about 20 minutes, and less steep. Getting to Sainte-Maxime is easier than getting to Saint-Tropez, which is a low bar, but still worth mentioning. The closest train station is still Saint-Raphael. From there, you can take a bus that goes directly to Sainte-Maxime in 45 minutes. You can also take a ferry from Saint-Tropez. It departs from the old port and drops you right on the waterfront promenade in Sainte-Maxime. Toulon doesn't show up on many French Riviera bucket lists. 180,000 people live here, and most of them work in defence, or one of the many industries that keep a major military harbour running. The city sits on the Mediterranean coast between Marseille and the Glitzier resort towns to the east, marking the western end of the Côte Azur. What makes Toulon interesting is the fact that nobody's trying to sell it. There are Roman ruins, one of the best markets in southern France, and a cable car that takes you up a mountain with some of the best views on the French Riviera. There's also a complicated history involving Napoleon and the self-destruction of an entire fleet. During the 15th and 16th centuries, France realised that controlling the Mediterranean meant having a serious navy, and having a serious navy meant having a serious port. Toulon became that port. By the time Louis XIV came to power, the transformation into a fortified naval base was underway. The king's military engineer built massive stone fortresses and dockyards that are still standing today. The message was clear. Toulon was France's fist in the Mediterranean, and it wasn't going anywhere. In 1793, during the French Revolution, Toulon briefly switched sides. Royalist forces invited the British Navy in to protect the city from revolutionary troops. Needless to say, that was a bad move. A young artillery officer named Napoleon Bonaparte showed up, positioned his cannons on the heights overlooking the harbour, and bombarded the British until they left. It was one of his first major victories, and it launched his career. After France fell in 1940, the southern zone was controlled by the Vichy government, and Toulon remained one of the few places where the French fleet was still intact. In 1942, the Germans broke the armistice and moved to occupy the whole country, including Toulon. Rather than let the Germans capture the fleet, the French Navy scuttled their own ships. On November 27, 1942, they sank 77 vessels in the harbour. Battleships, cruisers, destroyers, submarines. It was an act of defiance, but also a tragedy. The wrecks sat in the harbour for years. Some are still down there. Toulon rebuilt after the war, but the scars took decades to heal. Today, Toulon remains a naval city. The harbour is enormous, and you'll see warships and aircraft carriers docked alongside civilian ferries and fishing boats. It's a real harbour, not a scenic one, which means it smells like diesel and salt water. This is not the glamorous French Riviera of travel brochures. This is the French Riviera with grease under its fingernails. There's a small airport, Toulon-Hyères, 20 kilometres to the east, mostly used for domestic and seasonal flights. The main station sits on the Paris-Marseille-Nice line with regular TGV and regional services. The city centre is a 10-minute walk from the station, and it's not really pretty. The architecture is a mix of 18th century naval buildings and post-war concrete blocks. Heavy damage during World War II meant the rebuilding was not romantic. Place de la Liberté is Toulon's main square, and one of the largest squares on the Côte Azur. It sits at the edge of the old town, just south of the harbour. The square was redesigned in the 1980s, which explains the aesthetic. There's a lot of concrete and some geometric paving patterns, but walk a bit farther and you hit the old town, and that's where things get interesting. It's a tangle of narrow streets and small squares that feel more like Marseille than Monaco. The streets are named after sailors and naval battles. Every corner has a plaque commemorating something: a siege, a rebellion, a plague, a visit from some now forgotten admiral. The layers of history here just stack up, one on top of the other, and life keeps going. Toulon has beaches, sort of. They're not great. The main city beaches are narrow and backed by roads, so you're sunbathing to the sound of traffic. If you want proper sand and clear water, you need to head east toward the Presqu'île de Gien or take a ferry to Porquerolles. If you want the best view of Toulon, you take the cable car up Montferrand. The telepheric runs from the northern edge of the city up to the summit at 584 meters. It's a steep ride, about 6 minutes. Toulon spreads below you. The harbour, the old town, the naval base and the bay. The cable car costs €8 for a round trip, and it runs year-round except when it's too windy, which happens more often than you'd think. At the top, there's a memorial museum dedicated to the Allied landings in Provence in August 1944, plus hiking trails, picnic areas, and a restaurant with a terrace. What's your favourite place on the French Riviera? Let us know in the comments. If you loved this video, please hit the like button and subscribe to World Travel Guide.